What does betrayal look like? For me, it was a single sentence buried in my inbox. Effective immediately, your base salary has been reduced by 40%. No greeting, no context, no signature, just that. It arrived at 6:12 p.m. on a rainy Wednesday in November, right as I was finalizing compliance terms for a $19 million clean energy contract, one I'd spent the past 15 months assembling from scratch. I didn't shout. I didn't forward it to my team. I just sat there, staring, cursor blinking, heart strangely still. Around me, the office in Cleveland, Ohio had gone quiet. The hum of printers, the clatter of keyboards, it had all faded. People had left for the night. I hadn't even noticed. But the moment I read that line, my world stopped. I reopened the email, hoping I misread it. I hadn't. I reached for my coffee, then paused. Even that motion felt foreign, like I didn't belong in my own body anymore. 40%. Gone. No warning. Not laid off. Not suspended. Just erased quietly, like they wanted me to keep working, smiling, producing, while fading into the background. The money wasn't what broke me. It was the cowardice. I had thrown myself into this deal. Coordinated across 7 time zones, patched over cultural missteps, and delivered what no one else could. The client trusted me more than they trusted their own board. I was the reason this deal existed. And still this. I turned to the window. The city lights below flickered. Alive. And I felt like a ghost. I used to believe being indispensable meant being safe. But the truth, sometimes they let you finish the hard part. Then they cut you loose before the cameras roll. Malcolm Trent. That name rang behind my eyes like a dull bruise. He'd hovered near my project for months, asking questions he didn't need answers to, smiling a little too often. I assumed he was learning, but he wasn't. He was positioning. I see it now. He was waiting to take credit. I closed my laptop, sat there, let the fluorescent hum fill the space where my heartbeat used to be. I didn't plan a scene, but I wasn't going to fade quietly either. Tomorrow I'd walk in like nothing had changed. They'd see me as obedient, maybe bruised, quiet definitely, but fading out was never in my plan. They cut my salary, tried to write me out in silence. But the thing about ghosts, sometimes we come back just long enough to burn the whole place down. I used to think the work would speak for itself, that showing up early, staying late answering calls at 2:00 a.m. from Tokyo or Johannesburg, that it meant something. That if you gave everything, you'd at least be respected. That $19 million deal wasn't handed to me. I earned every line of it. From the first cold email to the 23rd revision of a painfully specific delivery schedule, I was the glue. I managed the time zones, cleaned up cultural stumbles, translated CEO speak into compliance terms, and built the trust that held the whole thing together. And I didn't do it for bonuses or praise. I did it because I believed in what we were creating. And foolishly, I believed in the people standing beside me. I remember our first big pitch. 7 board members flew in from Geneva. High stakes, glass-walled conference room. I had prepped for days, market forecasts, risk models, pricing breakdowns. I knew it backward. But Malcolm Trent had just been promoted. New suit, slick tone, the rising face of leadership. He turned to me smiling. Do you mind if I take the lead? I think they'll respond better to presence. I hesitated, then smiled. Let's make it count. I handed him the remote. He fumbled 2 slides I'd built from scratch, mispronounced the client's name, bungled the numbers, but he had charm. He recovered, the room laughed, applauded. Afterward, he said, "We're a good team." And I wanted to believe that. But looking back, I kept doing the work and he kept finding the camera. I told myself it was fine. Until the email, until I realized the man I shielded and supported was the one who decided I no longer mattered. Now, when I replay that meeting in my head, I don't feel proud. I feel naive. I handed him the match. And when the lights got too bright for me, he struck it. The deal's still days away from signing. He's still smiling on every call, summarizing my updates. He doesn't know I'm still holding the one piece that matters. And I'm not done yet. I had guided this deal from its first fragile steps, held hands through tense negotiations, built trust where there had been skepticism. And while Malcolm Trent stood under the spotlight behind the scenes, I was still there, watching, waiting, holding pieces only I knew how to assemble. They think the hard part is behind them. But the most delicate sections, the handwritten compliance, notes the post-meeting client adjustments scribbled on hotel stationery in Geneva, the grace period clauses they begged to finalize in person, none of those have been delivered yet. And I wasn't sure I'd be sending them. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had cracked. Blazer, crisp. Hair pinned back in the no-nonsense style I used every time I needed to be taken seriously. I didn't mention the salary cut. Didn't forward the email. Didn't even print it out. I went straight to Malcolm's office and knocked once. He looked up from his phone, blinked like he hadn't expected me, though of course he had, and smiled. That smile. The smug, half-curved one. The one that whispered, "I win." "Hey, Harper," he said, voice warm, like we were friends. "Coffee. Come in. Everything okay?" I closed the door behind me. I saw the salary notice last night. He nodded too casually. Yeah. Temporary budget pressure. Nothing personal," he said. Nothing, I replied. He leaned back in his chair, laced his fingers behind his head like he'd just explained away a late fee. "You know how it is? Quarter-end stress. Leadership wants tighter margins before we close something big." I didn't speak. He expected protest, expected me to plead, but I gave him nothing. I watched how he avoided my eyes a moment too long, how his voice rushed to fill the silence I left hanging in the air. He was selling me something, but I wasn't buying anymore. That's when it landed. This wasn't about budget. It never had been. This was an extraction. Quiet, clean, no confrontation. Just fade me out before the celebration. I had carried this contract with both hands for months, and now that the ribbon cutting was near, he was trimming everything that didn't fit his photo op. That meant me. "I appreciate the heads up," I said evenly. He looked surprised, then pleased, like I'd just proven I knew my place. But he didn't know. I wasn't done. "Good," Malcolm said. "Knew you'd understand? You've always been steady. Steady. Not brilliant, not essential, just steady." I nodded, once turned, and walked out of his office. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't slam the door. But something in me cracked. Every memory of stepping aside, of giving him credit during meetings, of smoothing his blunders in front of clients felt suddenly hollow. If this story moved something in you, hit subscribe, because the next chapter isn't just mine, it might be yours too. He thought I'd roll over. He thought I'd stay quiet, keep being useful, then fade. But I had no intention of disappearing. I planned to watch, to wait, and when the moment came, I'd be ready. Silence became my weapon, not because I lacked courage, but because I finally understood where real power lives, in knowing when not to speak. After that meeting, I disengaged. Let Malcolm have his stage. Let him present updates I'd written. Let him bask in praise from clients who still believed I was part of the team. Meanwhile, I took inventory. I pulled every contract version, every email, every legal markup. And there it was, exactly what I feared. 2 versions. Version A, the one I had spent 5 months perfecting, balanced, reviewed, approved by compliance, ready to sign. Version B, the one Malcolm sent out behind closed doors, overpromised timelines, fabricated carbon offset figures, impractical deliverables, glossy lies, wrapped in corporate polish. The client had signed that one, believing it was final. Only Malcolm, his assistant, and I knew both versions existed, but only I had both. Version A sat sealed in my personal fireproof drawer, timestamp signed and clean. Version B floated unsecured on the company's shared drive, untouched by legal, quietly catastrophic. That evening, I laid them side by side. The truth and the lie. I could have flagged the error. I could have sent a quiet correction, but I didn't. Instead, I folded version A, slipped it into an envelope, and locked it away. A secret I wasn't ready to share, because in that moment I saw it clearly. They thought I was out. But I was still holding the rule book. Malcolm thought slicing my salary had made me irrelevant. What he didn't realize was that I was the firewall. The client had asked for final clauses in my handwriting. They requested an in-person signal of approval. They trusted me, not him, to greenlight the final moment, and I hadn't sent a word. Not yet. And I hadn't sent anything yet. All week, I kept my head down, smiling when spoken to, answering only what was asked. Outwardly calm. Inwardly calculating. I wasn't going to push Malcolm Trent off the edge. I was going to let him sprint toward it at full speed and watch him fall. By Thursday, he was glowing. Corporate had sent out media invites. The executive conference room had been cleared and transformed into a global sustainability lounge. Glass displays recycled wood paneling, eco buzzwords on banners that meant nothing. Reporters were scheduled. Camera crews were measuring light angles. Champagne was chilling. Malcolm was treating it like his coronation. I watched from a distance. I wasn't invited to the meetings. No one asked my opinion. Not that I expected them to. That was the plan, after all, to erase me just enough so they wouldn't have to credit me. But here's what they forgot. You can crop someone out of the spotlight, but not out of a contract, especially not the only person holding the clean version. Still, I smiled when Malcolm passed me in the hallway. "Big day tomorrow," he said, grinning. "Hope you're getting some rest." I smiled back. Wouldn't miss it. He had no idea everything he was building sat on a fault line. And I stood over the trigger. That afternoon, his assistant hovered near my desk, nervous, polite. She asked if I had a backup version of the contract draft for internal alignment. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one Malcolm sent?" She nodded too quickly. "Yes, just in case. You know tech issues." I handed her a USB. It contained version B, the flawed, unauthorized one. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know I had already wiped my company laptop. All real files, compliance notes, redlines, version logs were locked on an encrypted external drive in my apartment. The work laptop, just spreadsheets, PowerPoint decks, and for fun, the outdated draft with the client's name spelled wrong. Let them search. Let them compare. They'd find what they thought they needed, but not what mattered. By evening, I saw Malcolm pacing inside his office phone, glued to his ear. He looked frustrated, agitated, yet never glanced toward me. Good. Let him feel the pressure. Let him sweat. The client might ask questions he's not equipped to answer. Let him doubt every version he's trying to present as final. I wasn't interfering. I was just watching quietly while the storm gathered right under his feet. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I simply let Malcolm do all the talking, because the closer he crept toward the stage, the more likely he was to trip on the one thing he never truly understood: the truth. Truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits, still, sharpened, like a blade. And the next morning, under bright lights and hollow applause, the blade was going to fall. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. sharp. By 9:20, the lobby of our Cleveland headquarters had been transformed into a theater of illusion. Fresh flowers, chilled champagne, branded backdrops. Camera crews adjusted lenses. PR interns zipped back and forth, pinning lanyards, smoothing banners, whispering into Bluetooth earpieces like it was opening night on Broadway. And Malcolm. He was already posing in front of the Northridge Energy logo. Navy suit, perfectly tailored. Tie pin, gleaming under the studio lights. He greeted the arriving clients with his signature rehearsed charm. Handshakes, hollow laughter, just enough familiarity to appear confident, but not enough to answer anything real. I stood off to the side, clipboard in hand. It served no actual purpose, but it gave me presence. I was the shadow among the spectacle. The clients arrived, right on time. Julia Keene, their lead representative, walked in with practiced precision. Her tone was clipped. Her eyes missed nothing. No smiles, no fluff. Straight to the table. The documents were already laid out. Custom pens placed at precise angles. Malcolm began his speech. Polished. Memorized. He thanked the entire cast departments who'd barely touched the deal names he could pronounce, but didn't understand. My name, not once, mentioned. I didn't blink. As he wrapped up, Julia opened the folder and began scanning the contract page. 1, 2, 3. Her brow pinched just slightly. Then, page 8, paragraph 6. Her finger hovered over the line as her voice sliced through the air, calm but exacting. This delivery schedule reflects the revised terms we discussed last month, correct? Malcolm blinked. Just a flicker of hesitation. Absolutely, he replied. That timeline was aligned across teams. She looked down again. This says, Phase 1 begins June 1st, she said slowly. We agreed on August 15th with a grace period. That wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. And just like that, the room shifted. A collective chill. The legal counsel leaned forward. A PR manager dropped her pen. And Malcolm. He tried to recover, fumbling for words. But the foundation had cracked. I believe that's just a formatting discrepancy, Malcolm said quickly. An outdated copy, perhaps. Julia raised one hand. Is there a finalized version reflecting our revisions? Silence. Malcolm turned toward his assistant. Her face drained. She fumbled with her tablet, tapping the screen with unsteady fingers. I can have someone pull it right away, she offered weakly. Malcolm nodded, voice tight and fast. We'll get it resolved. Just a technical issue. But Julia closed the folder with quiet finality. Her jaw set. I don't move forward on assumptions, she said flatly. And just like that, the curtain slipped. The performance began to crumble. Camera flashes stopped mid-click. Smiles faded. And I stood completely still. Clipboard pressed gently against my hip. Saying nothing. Not yet. This was the sound of a fault line beginning to split. And all I had to do was wait for the collapse. The silence in the room had weight. Real oppressive weight. Julia Keene sat with the contract folded in front of her. Expression unreadable. Malcolm stood just feet away, the studio lights making the sweat bead along his brow. He tried to look calm, but panic simmered beneath the surface. No one moved. The camera crew stood idle. PR managers glanced at one another, their rehearsed confidence flickering. Legal counsel sat stiffly, hands clenched, mouths shut. Malcolm's assistant continued tapping her screen, pretending to scroll, though she clearly had no idea what she was looking for. And I stepped forward. Not with drama, not with fury. Just 3 quiet, deliberate steps. I didn't look at Malcolm. I didn't have to. He felt it, the shift in the air as I approached. I faced Julia. My voice calm, controlled. That version was never approved, I said. I recommend we pause the signing. Just one sentence. Just the truth. It dropped into the room like the click of a loaded safety being released. Julia looked up, eyes locking with mine. And finally she saw me, not as a shadow in the corner, not as someone to overlook. She saw the person who joined every late-night call, redlined every clause, fixed every crisis. The person who built this bridge. Her lips thinned into a line. She nodded slowly. Thank you, she said, voice firm. She turned back to Malcolm. I want all official versions sent directly from legal. Until then, we hold. And just like that, the blade fell. Malcolm opened his mouth, but no words came out. He finally looked at me. And for the first time since this entire charade began, there was no arrogance in his eyes. Just realization. Just fear. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't say I told you so. I stood still, hands at my sides, heart steady, because this wasn't about revenge. This was about recognition. I wasn't here to ruin anything. I was here to protect what I'd built and to stop what had been warped beyond reason. Around us, the scene began to dissolve. The press packed up without a whisper. One reporter leaned toward another, mouthing the beginnings of a headline. Legal counsel murmured into their phones. The champagne stayed on ice, unopened, untouched. The moment had passed, and nothing had gone the way Malcolm had imagined. He finally approached me, stepping into the space between us like he had something to reclaim. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered through clenched teeth. I met his eyes steady, correcting the record. That's all. Then I turned and walked, past the cameras, past the tension, past the people who now looked at me not as background, but as the one holding the truth. And as I stepped into the hallway, I didn't feel angry. I felt grounded. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't thrown accusations. All I did was speak the truth and let the lie collapse under its own weight. By noon, the conference room was empty. The table cleared, the pens and folders gone. The champagne cart quietly wheeled back to storage. Julia Keene and her team had left without ceremony. No handshake, no second chances. Just a brief message to PR. We'll be reevaluating our position. We don't move forward with partners who can't manage internal consistency. That was the diplomatic version. The real one, you lost us. From the hallway, I watched Malcolm trail behind them, trying to salvage the damage. I couldn't hear what he said. I didn't need to. His body language said it all. Desperate. Exposed. Unraveling. When he turned back, something had changed in his face. The mask was gone. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Just panic. By 2 p.m., the first industry headlines dropped. Northridge Energy client walks out over legal discrepancy deal in jeopardy. By 3:15, I was called into HR. Not for discipline, not for gratitude either. Just a meeting compliance officer, legal counsel, and a stranger from risk mitigation. He took notes quietly. And then they asked, "Were you aware of the incorrect contract being circulated?" "Yes," I said. "Why didn't you stop the signing?" I took a breath and told them the truth. I paused, then answered plainly, because no one asked me to be part of it. They had nothing to say after that. At 5:02 p.m., I logged out of my email, closed my laptop, and slid a plain white envelope across the HR desk. Inside was my resignation letter. No drama, no accusations, no bullet points or justifications. Just one clean sentence. Effective immediately, I resigned from my position. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Didn't CC anyone. Didn't clear out my desk. I'd already taken what mattered weeks ago. The last thing I saw before stepping into the elevator was Malcolm Trent being led into a glass-walled conference room by 2 people in dark suits. Door closed. Blinds drawn. There would be an investigation. There always is after a fall that public. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I stepped into the cold Cleveland air and felt something I hadn't in a long, long time: freedom. Not just from Northridge, from the pretending, from the quiet erosion of myself in the name of loyalty, from the bullet points I once built for someone else's PowerPoint slide. They tried to erase me quietly, so I responded in kind. No fireworks, no leaks, no vengeance. I just told the truth and walked away while the foundation cracked behind me. And as I turned the corner, I didn't look back. Whatever came next, I would be choosing it. It had been 1 week since I walked out. 7 days without 3:00 a.m. emails, without calendar pings, without clutching a structure that was never designed to support me. I had returned my badge, deleted every Northridge meeting invite, shut off every notification. And yet, when the call came, I knew exactly who it was. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice instantly recognizable. Julia Keene. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. She didn't ask how I was adjusting or whether I missed the company. She went straight to the point. "We're re-engaging the project," she said. But not with Northridge. I sat up straighter. "We want to resume negotiations independently, and we'd like you to lead it." "Not as an employee," she added. "As a consultant." I didn't respond right away. A week ago, I might have hesitated. I might have asked if Malcolm knew, if Northridge would be informed. But not now. Not after everything. She continued, "We don't want middlemen. We want the woman who kept us honest," Julia said. "The one who actually understood the scope, the stakes, and the integrity behind the numbers." Those words landed deeper than I expected. They weren't praise for loyalty. They weren't thanks for sacrifice. They were recognition for competence, for presence, for impact. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn my seat at the table. I already had it. "I accept," I said. Just that. No excitement, no over-explaining, Just a clear, steady answer from someone who knew her worth. The very next day, a contract arrived in my inbox. A real one. My name was at the top. My rate, my terms. No backdoor edits, no vague phrasing, no hidden clauses buried in legalese. I read every line anyway, not because I didn't trust Julia, but because I trusted myself enough to never stop being thorough. When I signed and sent it back, I didn't feel the jolt of adrenaline that used to come with big wins. I felt something far better, steadiness. Because this time, no one could take it away. There were no politics shadowing me, no last-minute spotlight handoffs. Just me standing exactly where I'd always belonged. Only now, on my own terms. That evening, as the Cleveland sky faded into a muted blue, I sat by my apartment window, coffee in hand, watching the world move as if nothing had happened. But something had. I had stopped trying to be necessary to people who never really saw me, and I had become essential to the people who always did. I never went back to the office. There was no farewell lunch, no parting speech, no hallway applause. The version of me who once waited for recognition in that building, she no longer existed. In the weeks that followed, Northridge scrambled to save face. Press releases were issued full of polished phrases like leadership realignment and internal restructuring. But the industry knew, they always do. Malcolm Trent was quietly removed from the executive board. His name disappeared from the website overnight. There was no scandal, no press conference, just silence. The kind of silence reserved for people who once looked promising, and then quietly became problems. Meanwhile, I built something new, client by client, deal by deal. No middlemen, no politics, no polished pretenders fronting my work. And somehow, I wasn't angry. I was finally free. I never needed revenge. What I needed was clarity, and I got it. Because justice doesn't always show up in noise and headlines. Sometimes it arrives quietly through an empty executive seat that never gets filled, or a phone that simply stops ringing. Sometimes justice is just outlasting the lie. I stood still while everyone else performed. I told the truth when it would have been easier to disappear. I waited, and the truth, it did what it always does. It surfaced. I never raised my voice. I didn't leak emails or plan a dramatic takedown. I just watched the lie decay under its own weight until there was nothing left for it to stand on. If you've ever been erased, overlooked, or replaced, listen to me, you don't have to beg to be seen. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight for the spotlight they kept stealing. You just have to outlive the version of the story they tried to write without you. And when the time is right, you write your own. That's what I did. I'm Harper Lane. I'm 47 years old. And I used to believe that loyalty would protect me. Now I know better. Loyalty doesn't keep you safe, but clarity. That's freedom. If you've made it to the end of my story, I want to thank you not just for listening, but for seeing me. For far too long, I poured everything I had into a company that didn't see me at all. They valued my results, but dismissed my presence. They used my voice in contracts, my words in presentations, and my hours behind closed doors. But they never once looked me in the eye and said, "You matter." If that feels familiar, if you've ever been overlooked, replaced, or quietly erased, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your story. Tell me the moment you realized your worth didn't depend on a title, a salary, or a seat at someone else's table. Because that's what I've learned. Your value isn't something they can give you. It's something you reclaim. So here's my advice. If you're in a place where your silence is being mistaken for weakness, hold your ground. If you're being cut out of the frame, remember, they may control the camera, but they don't own the story. You do. You always have. Support those who build in the background, who lead without fanfare, who steady the ship even when no one's watching. If my story resonated with you, hit the like button, leave a comment, and please subscribe. Not because I want to go viral, but because I want to keep telling stories for people like us, people who've been through it and came out clear, calm, and unshakable. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And if you're still waiting for someone to tell you that let me be the first, You are not invisible. You are the foundation. And foundations don't break, they hold everything else up.